Ahri is a mage champion. She has AP ratios and Riot recommends that you buy AP items on her. But what if I told you that high elo Ahris, even professional players, are doing something entirely different? A good example is the Korean pro player Zest, who plays Ahri in solo queue, but not as a spellcaster. Instead, he plays her as an auto-attack based top laner, buying a strange mix of AD carry and bruiser items. The goal is to bully the other top laner with Ahri's surprisingly high attack range, using her mobility and crowd control to stay safe. It is a very interesting new trend, because AD Ahri is actually quite balanced while still breathing some fresh air into the game. She has clear and glaring weaknesses, but also phenomenal strengths, and if you know how to play around both of that, you can get some great results with AD Ahri yourself. But no worries, I will show you everything you need to know in this video. There are a couple of options when it comes to rune choices, but the aforementioned pro player Zest has a carefully optimized page for this playstyle, and I recommend you copy it. He goes for Fleet Footwork, Overheal, Legend Alacrity and Cutdown with Taste of Blood and Ultimate Hunter every single game. Fleet Footwork is extremely important, especially during the lane phase. Ahri has a paper-thin defensive profile, and you don't want the enemy top laner to take advantage of that. Again, she is designed as a mage champion and has very low armor and health. For that reason, once the enemy top laner catches you, you're very likely just dead. However, with Fleet Footwork's improved movement speed on energized procs, you can stay fairly safe, especially when also keeping in mind that Ahri has a 550 base auto attack range. This is the same level as a champion like Vayne or any other AD carry for that matter. Well, some have more, some have less, but most AD carries have 550 flat, so Ahri is essentially like an ADC. But again, you need Fleet Footwork's mobility to stay safe in lane, which is the weakest part of your game. Now your next rune, Overheal, somewhat synergizes with Fleet Footwork of course, but the main reason you take it is Ahri's passive. Ahri can heal quite a bit of health whenever she gets a takedown for example, but also when she just last hits minions in lane or during split pushing later on. The extra shield from Overheal really helps you patch Ahri's weak defensive profile. But you might be thinking, why not Presence of Mind? Aren't you still casting lots of spells? Well, that's not actually true. You don't even put a point in Ahri's Q spell for most of the game, only taking it when W is maxed and E is maxed or almost maxed. Sometimes you take Q on level 10-ish, but sometimes even only on level 13. Your E and your W, and your ultimate of course, are the only spells you're really casting, and you don't actually spam them like an AP Ahri would spam her Q. And I know we're technically still talking about Overheal here, but a quick side note to Ahri's trading patterns. You harass in lane by auto-attacking and casting W at the same time, causing all the W flames to hit the enemy as well as your auto-attack. And in order to make this trading pattern as safe as possible, you also want Legend Alacrity. It really helps during the early stages of the lane phase because it shortens your auto-attack animation of course, as it gives attack speed even at 0 legend stats. Having a short and fast auto-attack animation is so important as to not get punished, because again, any punishment you do take will cost you a lot. Additionally, the other options on this path are not really too intriguing. Legend Tenacity, well, once you get locked down you're most likely dead anyway, and Legend Bloodline also won't give you much, because lifesteal is actually not something with which you synergize. Once more, Ahri is designed as a mage and it really shows. Her base auto-attack damage is extremely low, so essentially there is not much to lifesteal. But how do you patch this damage? We'll get to that in the item sections. First, let's talk about Cutdown. This rune is your preferred choice on this path, because most champions in the top lane are very tanky, and you're playing this in the top lane for the most part. I can see this build or playstyle work in other lanes too, but top lane is where it's at right now. And with Cutdown, you kind of weaponize your low base HP. It will be a much more consistent damage source than Coup de Grace, and definitely more consistent than Last Stand. Now for the secondary path, most people go for more defensive options like bone plating or whatever, but Taste of Blood and Ultimate Hunter are really crucial. Again, your lane phase is kind of weak, and Taste of Blood helps you during the lane phase where it matters most for this build, and Ultimate Hunter gives you more access to your most important tool. Ahri with or without her ultimate is a night and day difference. Without ult, you're just an immobile AD carry essentially, one-shot fodder, but with ultimate, you're a monster. Okay, but what do you do to actually make or to actually get value out of your auto attacks? Again, low base AD, so very little reward from actually landing these hits. Well, look at the item build. During the early game you have Doran's Blade, Kirchhei's Shard and Boots of Swiftness. So Doran's Blade is a straightforward reward for your auto attacks, just 10 more AD, and also providing some safety plus Omnivamp. Again, Ahri's damage mostly still, well not mostly, but it's still largely magic damage, so the Omnivamp as opposed to just lifesteal does make a difference. With Kirchha's Shard you can already see where this is going. This Ahri build is kind of like cheating the auto attack system. Yes, you get rewarded for attacking, but not by actually dealing your attack damage in damage, but by all these special effects. Kirchha's Shard, for example, the energized proc, it does make a big difference in lane. Running up, pressing W and auto attack to get the Foxfire and the magic damage from Kirchha's Shard, this adds up over time fairly quickly. But again, you are very vulnerable in lane, so the movement speed from Boots of Swiftness on top of the movement speed from Fleet Footwork will get you a lot safer. Kiting is at the core of this champion's playstyle, so you need to stay mobile as much as you can. In any case, afterwards you go for the core build of Static Shiv, upgrading that first Kirchha's Shard, then Trinity Force, then Stormrazor. As you can see, we're buffing our auto attacks with all sorts of special effects. Static Shiv also crucially adds wave clear. Again, you don't max Q, you don't even put a point in Q. Your Q wouldn't do much anyway because you don't build AP, but Static Shiv allows you to clear the wave relatively easily still. Trinity Force is just the best mythic you can get with this playstyle because, again, it kind of buffs your auto attacks. Yes, Ahri has low base AD, so Trinity Force's Spellblade effect isn't really too potent on her, but it is still there and it still matters. Additionally, the stat profile is amazing, you get more movement speed, you get more attack speed, which means shorter auto attack animation, and crucially cooldown reduction for your ultimate. With Stormrazor you just add another Energizer effect, rewarding you more for that first auto attack you land with Energized proc, and also the movement speed on the item keeps you safer. Again, the more you have to outrun your enemy, you can't allow them ever to get close to you. You will see during the analysis what happens if they manage to do that. No, you need that mobility, you need to stay fast, you need to keep the enemy on their toes. Now for the late game you have a couple of options. Well, the full list of items that are viable is Rapid Fire Cannon, Blade of the Ruined King, Shield Bow, Wit's End and Guardian Angel, and which one you pick really depends on the situation. With Rapid Fire Cannon you essentially continue the trait of Energizer procs, further buffing your first auto attack, also making it safer. But with Blade of the Ruined King, you have also an option against high HP targets which you need to cut down over time. Again, you're not really using Ahri's low base AD, but Blade of the Ruined King's on-hit effect, which still gives you good value from those auto attacks, even though Ahri is technically not designed to do damage with auto attacks. Now Shield Bow is a more defensive option, which still provides some damage, but again, when they have good dive potential multiple assassins, Shield Bow can be necessary, and Wit's End and Guardian Angel are more like niche options if you really want to go defensive, plus some extra resistances. But yeah, most of the time, Zest for example, most of the time just picks Blade of the Ruined King, Rapid Fire Cannon, sometimes Shield Bow. But so far so good. Let's now go into the analysis so you know exactly how to play. During the earlier stages of lane phase, Ahri is actually surprisingly weak. Yes, she has the range advantage over most top laners, but her abysmal base stats can really cost you if you engage in longer fights or even in smaller trades. Even though Ahri can chip down K'Sante over time with her ranged auto attacks, all it takes is one opening, just one dash Q auto attack with Grasp of the Undying to more than make up for this. Just look at that, Ahri already at 60% HP just off of this one, not even mistake, it's just Ahri has low base stats and here it shows. At this stage of the game, your movement speed and healing with Fleet Footwork is really your main line of defense, and your only other option is your E, which is a nice form of crowd control, but it doesn't really increase the gap between you and the aggressor, and the duration is also fairly low at this point, so you can find yourself in very awkward situations. That's really important to point out. Ahri is not an auto-win in lane, you need to be extremely careful. It is actually of utmost importance that you time your E's correctly and also that you don't waste them, because else an enemy with just a little bit of mobility can reach you way too easily. But as we can see in this situation, K'Sante does end up getting charmed and Ahri can stay relatively safe in lane, despite being at 200 health. But it is of course still not a situation in which you necessarily want to find yourself. You're still very vulnerable, especially when the jungler shows up. The top lane is extremely long compared to the mid lane, and pre-level 6, Ahri is the definition of an immobile squishy champion. But the later the game goes, the better for Ahri. You have to keep in mind, your W is your main source of poke, W auto attack, you remember, and once you hit level 6, I mean, the entire dynamic changes, because now you can go on the offensive, the enemy is stuck in the long lane, because you can chase like no one else. By kiting correctly with your range and baiting out the enemy tools, you can create openings like these very consistently. Especially once you land your charm, this is your sign to go in, because the enemy will be hopelessly out of position and completely vulnerable to your attacks. Especially your W into auto attack really hurts at this point. Again, you have 3 points in the spell already, but also you have to keep the following caveat in mind. Even in advantageous positions like this one, K'Sante literally looks like 1 HP and Ahri was still at full, you are still Ahri, and you're, well, Bruiser Ahri for that matter. Bruiser Ahri, who tries to deal damage over longer periods of time with auto attacks, still extremely squishy because you have 0 defensive capabilities. This was arguably close, despite the situation being perfect for Ahri. Yet, with careful play, post 6 lane phase should be a breeze for you. I mean, again, the enemy can find the engage sometimes too, but your ultimate also has defensive applications, not just offensive one. In this situation, for example, K'Sante looked like, K'Sante thought he found the engage on Ahri, but Ahri essentially has a free disengage with her own ultimate, so she avoids K'Sante's initial burst, to then just completely turn the play around by using the other charges of her ultimate for offensive purposes. It's really a very intricate dynamic. One mistake on Ahri and you will go down, but if you outplay the enemy like that, there's not much they can do back to you at this point. But how do you need to play with Ahri once the lane phase is over? Well, surprisingly enough, Ahri is not a bad split pusher, especially once you hit Static Shiv. Static Shiv gives you the wave clear. They also take 1 point in Q here to add a little bit to that wave clear to finish off those minions, because Static Shiv, let's be real, had been nerfed a couple of times. But the item still obviously does everything it needs to do for Ahri, all while Ahri herself, despite being a squishy champion, can stay relatively safe because, again, she has her ultimates to escape. It's actually quite the tough situation for the opposing top laner because, again, in the later stages of the lane phase, they already had trouble dealing with you, and this is exactly the same dynamic in the split push matchup. Ahri just applies so much pressure with her range, wave clear and mobility at this point that there's really nothing they can do to defend the tower by themselves. You just push the wave in and they can't really prevent that. They also take chip damage from everything you do, including the Static Shift trigger. And when they try to outkite you, well, warding these bushes, it's something we've seen in the lane phase already, but warding bushes is also quite nice because you never want to phase check. You need to maintain your range. As you can see, as long as you do maintain that range, they can't do nothing. They will have to back off eventually because you deal damage to them, they deal no damage to you. In any case, you might be wondering, how does AD Bruiser Ahri fare in teamfights? Well, she's essentially a very mobile AD carry with a reset mechanic on ultimate. Ahri gets so many free auto attacks in at that stage because, well, the enemy would need to hard commit to actually get to her, and best case scenario for them, they only bait out 1 charge of her 3 charges ultimate, and she can just continue from there. To be fair, your auto attacks don't do all that much damage at this point, but still it is more than nothing, whereas the enemy deals absolutely 0 damage to you, all while you still threaten your hard crowd control with your E, setting up plays for your teammates. And once the main engage tools from your allies hit, you can just follow up so easily. No matter how far away the enemy or how far away that scenario was in relation to your own position, Ahri can close the distance like no other and threaten huge burst damage with her spells and with Energizer procs. Of course, even with Triforce, Ahri is still fairly squishy, and once the enemy gets to you, you will most likely die. But again, they would need to hard commit to even have a chance, and 3 charges of that long-range dash are so much distance to cover, it really doesn't make sense for them to allocate all those resources just to try and catch you. But of course, the mobility is only one of Ahri's phenomenal qualities. The other one that truly sets her apart from other ranged top laners is her reliable hard crowd control. Bruiser Ahri can just freely follow up on your own team's engaged champions with her own follow-up with crowd control, all while staying relatively safe. If any other squishy, long-range damage dealer, I don't really want to say AD carry here, let's just say AD carry. If any other AD carry would play like this, they would leave themselves wide open. But not Ahri. Her engage and disengage and potential playmaking potential, sorry for the awkward phrasing, but it's just so good in solo queue. And that safety really shows, especially in these more chaotic late game team fights. Ahri can just dash in and out as she pleases. She will get those resets, those takedowns for the extra charges in her ultimate. It's so hard for the enemy to punish you. You deal huge damage with your auto attack based or with your on hit based items, and the enemy will just fall. But there's one more thing. Playing a champion like this in the top lane can sometimes really hurt your team composition, and sometimes in these situations a tank is just better. So if you want to learn how to play the best tank in the game, K'Sante, click the link on your screen.